Good evening to all. In fact, when Gopal Srinivasan asked me to share my thoughts this evening with you, and Bala and Suresh came, though I had my difficulties in plugging this program, when Bala told me people are coming from outside the city, from Coimbatore, from Tirupur, from Tiruchendur, that's what attracted me to be present here. You know, in the course of my advisory to leading corporates, the biggest problem I found, the complex mindset that we live a Western exterior and an Indian interior. This is where the conflict arose. It's a cultural mismatch, possibly because of our colonial background. And we know practically nothing about this country. I'll just start with an example of an event which I happened to participate in IIT Bombay sometime in November or December 2010. The program was called Avenue Citizen YouTube. You may have access to it because it's a very, very important program. So regarded in IIT. Ahead of me, Mr. Adi Gardner spoke. And very well prepared speech, very profound thoughts, backed by enormous amount of statistical evidence. And the thrust of the speech was that we were a great civilization, we had great achievements in every field other than economics. And this is the area where we failed badly, and only because of the fortunes of globalization that we began rising. And he also spoke about what Dr. Krishna said in 1978, that we could not grow because it was Hindu rate of growth. And unless we could overcome that impediment of being civilizationally what we are, we could never be regarded as a success. We can never become a success. You know, young minds, many research scholars, academics in that institution, they give a standing ovation to them. I had gone to speak something else, but I completely changed. Because this speech, in spite of being studied with statistics, evidence, betrayed total ignorance of the recent developments about how the West has begun perceiving India. Not this India, India of 2000 years ago. You know, in 1917, when Japan began rising as a big economic power, the West was surprised. How could an Asian nation develop? So that set off a research by one Paul Biro, a Belgian economist, and he came out with an astounding finding that in the year 1750, Asia had a much better standard of living than Europe, because China's share of GDP was 33%, India's share of GDP was 24.5%, and that of Britain 1.8%, and that of America 0.1%. And he said it is only subsequently, in the next 150 years, India crashed to 1.8%, and China 6%, and America and England grew to 48%. When he made this research public in the year 1983, there was a huge debate in Europe whether Europe developed because of some inherent capacity, competence, technology, or financial superiority, or its banking system, or did it develop only because of the political mastery it acquired over the rest of the world. This became an acute debate, and many sociologists began saying that if what Paul Biro says is true, we got advantage because of the colonial mastery we had over the rest of the world, and so the OECD countries constituted research under the caption Development Studies Institute and put Angus Madison, one of the most well-known economic historians, to study this, gave him a lot of support. Angus Madison put his thoughts that if what Paul Biro says is true, which I don't believe, it is true. If he says it is true, then West did not have any inherent advantage, it had only the military advantage. You know, in the year 2001, Angus Madison came out with a study, not about 1750, he came out with a study of the 2 millennia of the economic history of the world. From first year of AD, that is Common Era, to 2008. He also forecast what would happen till 2008. And he gave the astounding finding that till the 15th century, India was the leading economic power in the world, with GDP ranging between 34% to 28% in this period, and China was number 2. And China overtook India in 1600. India again overtook China in 1700. Both were overtaken by other countries in 1900. And this is regarding, you can go and see the OECD website, this is regarded as the most authentic economic history of the world. When I mentioned this to the IIT students, the scholars, the researchers, I have spoken in IIM, no one has any clue about this. That we are a performing economy, we had a performing culture. It is not that just Angus Madison said this. You look into Marco Polo studies. He says the Indian commercial ships were several times larger than the Greek ships, and it required 300 crews to operate. And you know, at the time of Akbar, we had 40,000 merchant vessels flying around India. And at the time the British came into India in 1850, we had 34,000 ships. And when the British left India, we had 1,300 ships. And the British banned the construction of ships in Hooghly River. And they prevented our ships from carrying goods to England and from England. And I mentioned all this. And I also mentioned the 2nd century AD record of the Roman emperor saying, Roman emperor representative in Egypt saying that India has continuously a trade surplus with Roman Egypt, and if it continues, Roman Egypt will become insolvent, and the surplus, if it is turned into today's value, it is $172 million. See, all these are published records which is available, but your educational institutions, however high and mighty they are, they don't educate Indians about India. So unless you have pride about your civilization, your culture, your tradition, you can never have pride about family. Because family is not an issue in the West. And West is an issue in our mind. And family is a very difficult proposition in the West, in the sense, in the last 30-40 years, the families have collapsed. Today, marriage outside the wedlock in America is 41% of the babies born. And 50% of the families are single parent families. Only 28% of the families where husband and wife live together with children. And so it's an over. For example, Scandinavian countries may not exist, which are number 1 countries in Human Development Index today. After 50 years, they may not exist at all, because they are not replacing the dead by the born. So we must understand what kind of world we are looking to as vision, as example, as illustration, as the direction towards which we have to go. So I found the tremendous amount of ignorance. And when I explained all this to IIT students, they had no idea about all this. And afterwards, of course, I don't want to go through the entire facts which I placed before them. And afterwards, the students, the professors, the IIT academics came to me and said, "You don't stop with this lecture, you please run a course for us." Actually, I did not give them time in 2011. 2012, I ran a 21-hour course for them in this, where I brought in all these facts and said not only about what happened in the past, what's happening today, what's likely to happen in future, what is the lesson that 2008 economic crisis of the world has taught the West. And it is not that the West can wriggle out of what it has done. They have destroyed their civilizational assets to build financial assets. You can never rebuild families. You cannot, by a government order, say families should revive. It's not possible. Families exist by culture. They are rooted in tradition. Unless your economic system, your political system, your social thought learn to respect the sensitivities of tradition, culture, religion, respect for parents, elders. These are all things, which the Western civilization lost in the last 50, 60 years. There are reasons for that. unless you understand the difference between the West and us, you can never run a family business. If you have this confusion of the West haunting you, harassing you, making you feel inferior, you can never do family business in this country. It's on a different discipline, different culture, different orientation, different approach to life. And so after I ran the course, in IIT they are making it a permanent thing, and other IITs also want this kind of thing because they have absolutely no understanding of what is the Indian way. And what we were told in 1991, this is very important for us. 1991-92, because I had an occasion to travel across the country because I was very worried about the kind of economic philosophy which was being marketed at the time. Dr. Manmohan Singh brought Dr. Jagdish Bhagwati and sought an advice from him. You know, Dr. Jagdish Bhagwati is one of the finest economic minds in the world. And Paul Krugman, who got the Nobel Prize in 2008, acknowledged that Jagdish Bhagwati was his guru. And Jagdish Bhagwati gave a 72-page paper to the government of India, in which he said the biggest problem of India is the fact that the Indian people are saving more than what they need. The family savings is 19% of the GDP. It should be brought down to 9 to 10%, and the balance 9 to 10% should be released for consumption. Then it will go to increase sales, then it will go to increase production, then it will go to increase employment. And he worked backwards, the supply side economics, and said that the Indians have to be forced to spend and cut the interest rates. And he gave one graphic example also as to how the Indian women are so stingy unless you change their habits. It's such a, in a macroeconomic advice, he's giving a micromanagement of how the family orientation must be. He said you must construct huge malls and get attractive goods from all over the world, jewelry and all kinds of gadgets and your textiles, and you must move the women out of their bearings and make them consumers, and once you do that, the economy will succeed. Can you believe this? This was on the website of the government of India till about 2 years ago. I think they felt so ashamed of this advice, they removed it from the website. See what happened in India. At that time, the family savings was 18 to 19% of GDP. Today, it is 28 to 29%. At that time, the savings to GDP ratio was 22%. Today, it touched a high of 36% almost. And our biggest problem at that time was that India would manage only 24% of investment, and because of that, we are going only at 6%. You know the relationship between investment and growth. 1/4 of the investment is the growth rate. This is the capital output ratio. It is not that in India you add up the production. You want to find out what is the investment last year, that will be the growth this year. This is the normal. 25% of your investment translates into growth rates. And when Atal Bihari Vajpayee was Prime Minister, when I had occasion to deal with the government, and they used to take my advice, at least hear my advice, if not take my advice. And one of the points that used to be mentioned by our economic advisors is that we have only 24% investment, we have to increase to 32% investment. And we can't generate that kind of savings, and so we need foreign investment wherever it comes from. We don't see the color of money, we want money. And so we want 8% additional investment every year to promote the growth rate to 8%. You know, if you calculate, of course, many people have done it, I need not have to tell you, you might have yourself read in newspapers, including Shankaracharya, who was the advisor to the government of India, that from 1991 to 2011, the total amount of foreign investment that came into India was only 1.2% of the total investment in this country. And our investment went up to as high as 38% in 2007-8. And what drove India? Now it is openly accepted, nobody even questions it. And that is the specialty of the Indian model, that without foreign investment, India had achieved a growth rate which was considered unachievable without foreign investment, and that is because of the family structure.